Hi, good evening, and welcome to our series that showcases the impacts of Drake Art and Design alumni. I'm Julia Franklin, Anderson Gallery Manager, and joining us tonight is illustrator and muralist Marissa Hernandez. As we begin, the Anderson Gallery at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, acknowledges that the land on which we gather is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Iowa, Sauk, and Meskwaki peoples. We offer our respect to their elders, both past and present, and to future generations. We recognize our presence here today is the result of the ongoing exclusion and erasure of Indigenous peoples who were the original stewards of this land. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, let the ties these nations have to their traditional homelands be strengthened, renewed, and reaffirmed. Now, I'd like to formally introduce Marissa Hernandez, illustrator, designer, and muralist. She is one of the newest alumni joining us for our winter showcase. Marissa is the recipient of the 2020-2021 Drake Alumni Artist Residency at Mainframe Studios. She recently completed murals for the Candle Bar, Slowdown Coffee Company, Art Terrarium, and the Conmigo Early Education Center. Marissa graduated with a BFA degree in painting and graphic design in May during this pandemic. Remarkably, Marissa is more active than ever and has used this time to safely partner with Des Moines businesses and agencies to transform our city. Marissa focuses on marginalized identities and places Black, Indigenous, and people of color in idealistic worlds. She uses murals and social media as tools for accessibility and large-scale representation. And she is an extraordinary example of someone using their creative talents to make a true impact in our community. Tonight, we are so thankful Marissa can be here to share her artwork and process. A question and answer session will follow, so please type your questions in the comment section. It's going to be an inspiring talk. Please join me in welcoming Marissa Hernandez. Take it away, Marissa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa Hernandez, and as Julia said, I just graduated from Drake in May. I'm a painter, designer, and muralist, and I'm going to share with you a presentation and talk about some of my work. So a little bit about me. This is just like a screen grab from my website. A large portion of my work focuses on identity. So growing up in a low-income household and the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, I struggled to fit in with the upper middle-class white population around me. And something that is a shared experience for low-income Black, Indigenous people of color and children of immigrants is that we often carry the weight of securing financial success for our families and are always seen as another opportunity to break the the generational curses of like oppression and all those types of things. So my work explores those marginalized identities using shape, color, and portraiture, and I create work that acknowledges the subtleties of these groups as I continuously educate myself on the issues that each community faces. One of the first things I wanted to share and talk about is one of the biggest projects that I've done since graduation. And my first mural ever was completed in September, and this was for Conmigo Early Education Center. This is a bilingual education center located in Des Moines on Scott Avenue. And with this mural, I wanted it to serve as a visual affirmation for children, specifically children of color, to go after their passions. And in this design, I wanted to center them and prioritize their dreams. So that's why I included some different like STEAM elements, as well as like musical elements, and along with the butterflies, which is kind of a symbol for immigration. And a large portion of the children that attend the daycare are Latino. The second mural that I completed this year was in October for the Slowdown Coffee Co. And this is a new coffee shop. They just opened in November, and it's located in Highland Park. So up above, I included a few pictures. The one on the left is a bit more what it looks like actually in this space. It's like a cozy, dimly lit place. Really nice atmosphere with a lot of plants. And on the right here is like another image, but I kind of messed with the brightness a bit so you can see the design a little bit better. And here I've included all the people that are in the design. With this design, and the way I always design, it isn't always about diversity, it just is. It's just something that comes natural to me as I naturally am drawn to these kinds of designs. When it's always about diversity, it feels a bit performative. So this is a design that centers people of color without making them have to perform or do anything or be extraordinary. They can just exist as themselves and for themselves. So this mural is an example of that. And these are two other murals that I've done, one at the Candle Bar in Valley Junction and one at Art Terrarium, which is a plant store in Des Moines. These ones were a lot of fun because I got to try out like sort of different styles. The Candle Bar, it was really nice to be trusted to do something different and show my adaptability. And it's been a fun challenge to adapting my style to provide a piece for the client that best fits their space and captures the mood that they want to make their customers and clients feel. So that was a lot of fun. And then this one's at the Candle Bar, again, Valley Junction. It's a new business where you get to select your own fragrances and vessels and make your own candles. And Art Terrarium is also selling some stickers of this mural at their shop. A big question that I always get asked is why I do faceless portraits. And I didn't always do faceless portraits. This was kind of a new thing that I started, and a simple answer is just representation, but it's really a lot more than that. The first thing you tend to realize about a person is their facial features, and this removing their facial features from their portraits allows you to focus on other parts of them and kind of look at them as a whole person, especially in the slowdown mural. Since they're all less described, you can start to see them as more of an ensemble and a community rather than focusing on their bodies and their facial features and all those aspects of them. So it kind of, like I said earlier, just allows them to be themselves. And I tried that kind of representation with this one in the top left here is one where I was starting to get at the idea of it, but I wasn't sure how to fully do representation. And something that if you watched Jill's talk last week, she talked about her professor, Angela Battle, who is also my painting professor. She was someone who helped me to start thinking about that when I talked about kind of the things that I wanted to do with my art. She always asked a lot of hard questions that I didn't always have the answers to, and I always didn't want to answer, but I started thinking about how important those questions were, and it really helped me discover what direction I wanted to go to with my art. And one of the exercises she gave me to challenge myself was creating portraits of myself, just quick ones every day. And I only ended up doing 4, but that was also along with what I was saying about facial features. I think that as a society, we focus too much on what we look like and aspects of our bodies and faces that we like and we don't like. And I think that leaves us less time to discover who we are, our personality, things that we enjoy and make us feel good, if we're always focusing on if we look good or not, if we think we're the right weight, or if we think our hair looks nice. And I think it's more important to kind of not put as much emphasis on that and focus on more of a body neutrality, which is not necessarily like body positivity, which is, but too much positivity can be a little bit toxic, and it forces you to always still think about your body in either a positive or negative way. And then body neutrality is more of just letting yourself exist as you are. Although I still do like to use faces on more descript portraits. The bottom right is a portrait of my abuelita Tea, and that's my father's mother. So this was more of like a tribute to her, and that's why I put the facial features in there, because it's really important who she is. And that was also another form of doing a representation in a way. Often I go to galleries and there's no one there but white faces, and I would like to see someone who is working class and doesn't fit all those descriptions, not necessarily in fancy clothing, not necessarily in a fancy background, as in like a big house or something. So this was my kind of way of doing that in another route. And also this like fun little side project that I started of doing portraits of my family. So down here I have my dad, and then next to him is my sister. Something I also wanted to talk about was the topic of diversity and representation. So I included a few mural designs that I did that were for proposals. And I thought it was important to include this racial dot map here. So if you Google racial dot map, it's like a database collecting information from the census and plots those points of households by race on the map. So the one up top here is Des Moines. And you can really see how segregated Des Moines is on the outskirts of all these places. You see a lot of blue dots. And I don't know if you could see the key, but the blue dots are represent the white population. Green is the Black population. Red is the Asian population. And orange is Latino population. And on the topic of why I was saying earlier that to me it's not always about diversity, that's just kind of what I naturally go towards, is that I grew up in Des Moines until I was about 10 years old. I went to a super diverse elementary school. And so I didn't really think too much about my identity in that way I never viewed myself as a minority. I knew like the racial struggles I would have to overcome. My parents always told me that I have to work really hard at an education and work harder than my white peers, but I never really viewed myself as a minority in that way until I moved to Altoona, which is the smaller one on the bottom half of the screen. So as you can see here, you can barely see any other color but white dots, or the blue dots that represent the white population. And this is where I started to really kind of lose my identity. I was probably one of 10 people of color at my school. And there was just a lot of ignorance and intolerance. They just didn't really know how to be kind to people that weren't white, basically. And I wanted to include this because I think it's important for people to know that there is a large Black, Indigenous, people of color population in Des Moines, and that the reason why if someone from out of town comes to Iowa or to Des Moines and they would describe it as so white is because they're not in these areas that are basically heavily segregated. A lot of the murals, there's a lot of murals done through Third Space Des Moines by artists of color, but they're really beautiful murals, but they don't get as much recognition because they are all in these areas that white people don't typically visit because they, for whatever reason, feel like they're unsafe. But I wanted to talk about this recent, in 2020, this uptake of white people finally acknowledging that diversity is somewhat important. In these two mural designs, the reason why I included them, there's a gallery who kind of contracts murals. So businesses will come to them and say what they want, what kind of design they're looking for, what it's for. And a lot of the times the clients will list that they want something that showcases diversity. And I'm always skeptical of it because they mean this kind of corporate diversity where it feels like this kind of gross collection of people of color. Like they want to make sure they get one of each to make sure that their business looks so diverse and to make sure that they don't get any kind of backlash. And that's kind of what I leaned towards, was the corporate diversity with the top one. It felt like I had to include like 2 white people in there, or if I didn't, then they probably wouldn't have accepted it, which it didn't get accepted anyway, but I'm glad I did it because this is what got me started into designing for murals. And then the bottom one was me taking that idea of diversity, but not listening or constraining to the corporate version of it. So I have 3 people represented here amongst this architecture-inspired, mathematical, futuristic type of background. And I thought this was a way to showcase different people in an aesthetic that we don't really get to see like people of color in, is like the soft, pink, carefree aesthetic where they're not having to perform who they are in order to just exist. And this one didn't get accepted either. And I have these talks a lot with other artists and family members of what the point is of asking for diversity if they go ahead and choose white artists to do this anyway. And I think I've only been in the mural industry for just a short amount of time, but I've noticed a severe lack of, in these bigger, more well-funded mural projects. More often than not, if you see a big mural in Des Moines, it's by a white artist. And I think that Des Moines could be a lot better, especially like the Iowa and Des Moines art scene, of being more inclusive of other voices. Diversity isn't just showing people of color. It's also about having actual people of color from all different types of backgrounds do art through their voice. And their voice in itself is something that's important and I think needs to be heard. And I think that Des Moines could really do, and Iowa and really the world, a better job of giving Black, Indigenous people of color these opportunities instead of favoring like a handful of artists to do that. So I really could talk about the topic of diversity and representation for a while. Another thing I did want to talk about, though, is I tried to find who said this quote exactly, but I think that it's something like diversity and representation is important, not just so you can see yourself as the hero of the story, but so other kids can see that other people are also the heroes of the story. So you don't always have to be the protagonist. And I think for so long, white kids were always the protagonists. So whenever they're not the center of something, the center of a mural, the star in a movie, then they feel like it's oppressive to them. There's another quote that's goes something about, I can't think of it now, but when you're so accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And I think that's very true. And I think it's something that white people are just starting to grasp or learn the hard way this year. That it's not oppression, that people just want equality and they're not really used to that. And they're not used to giving up some of their privileges so that other people can just live equally. So with my pieces that I design, I am trying to have these sorts of conversations about different nuances within race, talking about intersections with race and class and gender and body type, things that I wish I could talk about in classrooms and have these kinds of debates, but they weren't really allowed or given attention to. These are the kind of hard conversations that I think could really move us forward instead of the basic conversation of just that racism is bad. We all know that by now. I think we need to start actually doing the work. And then with these designs, it's kind of centering Black, Indigenous people of color so that white people stop always seeing themselves, putting themselves in the center of every conversation, hoping that they will start doing the work so that we don't have to, because this isn't a problem that we created. This is something that is forced upon us, and we just have to navigate systemic racism every day, but it shouldn't be our problem to fix. I did also want to talk about a few of my other works. I really like a lot of mediums. I'm not specifically loyal to any one medium. I think you can tell a lot of different stories with different mediums. So these are all intaglio prints, and I did them my senior year at Drake. On this top left one is a bit about immigration. It's just a topic that I can't ever stop thinking about. So I did something that was a tribute almost, but not making it like an explicit, gory, trauma type of tribute that I think often people like to see these like traumatic photos in order for them to start caring about people who need the help. And I don't think that's always necessary, and it brings up a lot of trauma in people of color. I think there's other ways to spread awareness without traumatizing people. And then some of these other ones are this one with the duplicated image up here started off as just an image. It didn't really have an objective in the assignment, but we were told to add sheen collé, which is adding something on the background of it, and it could either enhance your piece or completely transform it. And I scanned images and ripped pages to create this collage that emphasizes climate change. So that's what this sheen collé transformed this piece into. And these bottom two are just a little bit about just expressing my love for botanical types of things and just trying out different designs. And I had a lot of fun doing those, which I hope to get back into printmaking, but I don't really have all the equipment. This is something new that I started once Drake kind of had to go into quarantine and we did online classes. We didn't have the studio space for painting, and I just started a big project which I had nowhere to work on. So I started this other project, which I've always wanted to do, making these tapestries. And on the top left is a finished version of this tapestry. Here are some in-progress pieces. But this one was really fun. I talked a lot about liking to do handmade things and feeling a connection to who I am by doing more handmade things and taking the time to be really slow and careful with my work. This was also a fun way to connect more with my mom and get her involved in my work as well. She's really into knitting, and she even taught me how to knit when I was, I think, around 10. She has a lot of yarn, and I just got done organizing it for her, but it was really fun to kind of team up with her on this project and she let me look through her yarn to see if I wanted to use any for it. It was just a fun way that started off getting us closer to my artwork. We could talk about it and getting her more involved in the process. With her and my family, I use them a lot for feedback. I think which I talked about before and I talk about on my social media and through my work, is that I think the art world can be pretty pretentious in ways. If you don't know the classical ways and rules of how to do things, then it's almost like you aren't allowed or you're not doing it right. And I think that people don't have to be classically informed on any specific principles of art to be good at it or enjoy it. And I wanted to open up that accessibility for art. And it's important to have my family's point of view on that, because I think if regular people can't walk into galleries and enjoy the art, then I don't think it's that effective. So I'm starting to include them more with what I do, and they help kind of guide me with what I'm going to do next. I also wanted to talk about some of my mathematical work. So I do have a background in STEM. I didn't actually get into painting or wanting to do art as a career until my third year of college, or my second, around then. I did a independent study with a professor, my painting professor at Kirkwood in Cedar Rapids. And we kind of talked about the relationship between painting and mathematics and science too, really, in all of the STEM fields, which is why people refer to STEM most of the time as STEAM now, just because that's how connected they are. And the two on the right are what my works I did at Kirkwood that kind of started off the mathematical paintings. And these are ones that feel just really natural to me. I like coming up with all these shapes that are heavily influenced by statistics or calculus, geometry. And I like assigning colors to them. When I'm doing this, I feel like there's a right and a wrong. So that's why these are almost the most natural pieces for me to complete, because they almost complete themselves. Like if I do a certain sphere or a half sphere, it has to be this shade of orange or I have to change it. So this painting went through a lot of changes for me to get it right. The gray background actually used to be like a bright pink, which I think would work for a future piece, but for this piece, it just didn't work. And I like these ones a lot because I get to have fun and show that art is just as important as math and they can be related in a lot of ways. And this one below, the digital version, is actually a smaller painting that I've started working on now. And I'm going to incorporate using thicker oil paint and a lot of texture to play with that element of it, raising the shapes off the page a bit. And that's also why I really love this piece. I have this mural design again down here, because it was also very inspired by these mathematical scientific shapes. I also want to talk about a little bit my studio and what that space kind of looks like. Julia mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to show a few pictures. So I have all my oil paints organized on a pegboard. The studio is really helpful to me because I used to have all my art stuff kind of stored away in different places in my house just so it would fit. So I didn't really even know what I had. And it's really nice to actually just see it all in one place. And I feel like it's really helped me to want to create more. And I have this lovely egg chair that I found, and I sit in there, and that's actually where I sit and design most of my murals. And behind it is like an inspiration board, photo wall type of thing. And then this last picture is kind of to show that I am really into sustainability in the traditional way that has been done for a long time. Now we're seeing sustainability being talked about as like a super trendy rich people thing that they do, I don't know, to be like altruistic. But I think that low-income households have been the most sustainable their entire lives, and it's just now catching on. I save like butter containers, pasta containers, soup cans, bean cans, like everything. And that's what a majority of my art storage is, what I use to store mixed up paint colors. So that's to represent that. I also included a few pictures this last Friday. I did a live painting and Q&A session with the Department of Cultural Affairs for the Iowa Arts Gala. And this painting was a tribute to 3 Iowa women, or women with ties to Iowa. They all went to college here. And the great things that they have done for STEAM. So on the left is Elizabeth Catlett, and she got her master's at the University of Iowa for sculpture. She ended up being a professor in Mexico for the last half of her life, earning Mexican citizenship. So I thought that was really cool, and I learned a lot about things that women have done in Iowa. And in the middle is Dr. Lilia Abron, and she was the first Black woman to get a PhD in chemical engineering. And then on the right is Ada Hayden, and she was the first woman and 5th student ever to get a PhD from the Iowa State University, back when it was Iowa State College. And so this painting is really like a tribute to them, and kind of a celebration of what they have accomplished for themselves and for Iowa. And I've also included a picture of kind of my workspace while I was doing that. And here I've included a picture of my sewing machine, because like I mentioned earlier, I have so many hobbies. I like to work in so many different mediums. And I also like to sew a lot. I actually that was like the first career that I ever wanted to do, was to be a fashion designer before I wanted to be an artist. So it's fun incorporating that and having a studio space to sew in as well. I wanted to share one of my works in progress. This large painting that I mentioned earlier that I couldn't fit in my house, so I couldn't work on it, was this tribute mural. It's called Abolish Ice. And it's kind of a tribute to these kids that have died in ICE custody or shortly after. And what ICE will do is they'll know when a kid or a person is close to dying, so they'll release them so that that death is not on their hands. But this is basically ICE's immigration and customs enforcement, for those of you who don't know. But it's basically like a fully functioning domestic terrorist group almost. All they do is separate families and cause traumatic experiences for everyone. So that's what this mural really is for. And I wanted to take my time and really put care and work on it. So that's what I'm currently working on right now. And it's 7 feet by 10 feet. I also want to talk a little bit about my website / shop called Hernandez Design Co. So the Slowdown mural was one of my most popular murals. So I made them into all these little 5x7 prints that you can buy on my shop if you like the work. There's also one of the whole Slowdown mural and one of the whole Conmigo mural, and I accompany those with some stickers that I sell. And I also sell a few of my sister's work because she's also an artist. She did some of the flower stickers and the duck claw machine print that I really love. So if you like any of those, you can buy those on hernandezDesignCo.com. Thank you for listening and watching this. And if you want to learn more about my work or get updated on what I'm working on, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at marissa.monstera. And I also have a website, hernandezsignco.com, where you can shop for my prints or just look at a whole catalog of all the work that I've done. And I will be updating constantly with all the new work that I'm doing.
Thanks so much, Marissa. Oh my gosh, you covered so many things. We are going to open it up for questions. So if anybody in the viewing audience has a question for Marissa, if you want to type that in the comments, we'll be able to see that and be able to share that question so that Marissa can answer it. I'm struck by how creative you are and how genuine you are and how vulnerable you are, that you're sharing your experience, that you're using your voice and your talents to share things with people who maybe still aren't aware in thinking about diversity and representation. You've made me consider so many different things, and it was good to hear you acknowledge that and speak about it. It's clear that your work is there to start conversations, that you've dealt with being isolated, at least in your high school experience, and that your goal, it sounds like, is to bring people together. You talked early on about the need to see the groups of people as ensembles and as community, and I really see you echoing that throughout all of the pieces that you do. So I want to thank you for sharing your work, and I know it's a courageous act to do that publicly, so thank you for that. It looks like Lydia has a question for you. So can you talk a little bit about your process in creating those murals for a client, like at the Candle Bar or Slow Down Coffee Company? Do they give you any points on what they want, or do you design a few options and present it to them?
That's a great question. So it's a little bit of both. They approach me and somehow they've either got a recommendation for me or they've saw my work on Instagram and they really love it. And I ask them questions on what they want to accomplish in their space. So if they want like a cozy atmosphere, inclusive atmosphere, and then we go back and forth on what we can do for them. And then I'll come up with some sketches and then they'll pick from those and then we'll go from there.
I want to build on that for just a moment. I'm really interested in how you choose what murals to apply for and what happens when you accept a commission, because you've already mentioned your goals in your artwork, what you're hoping to achieve, but what is it about the particular space? So what does that have to do with your work and your goals?
So the Slowdown's a really good example of that. They are a new coffee shop, but they wanted to not be like an implant in the neighborhood, too expensive for everyone to afford. They wanted to make sure that their space was inclusive of the actual residents of Highland Park. And they wanted to celebrate those people and kind of have something that would bring everyone together and be a celebration of that. So I asked them kind of like what their goal was, and that was their goal, is to create something that was cozy and inclusive. And then the candle bar was more of like a fun thing to kind of be like energizing to the space.
Yeah, I keep thinking about the idea of public space and accessibility, and I'm really excited to see more of your work up and around the city and around the state. It looks like Angela Battle has a question for you. I'm so glad she could join us. So Angela is asking, and she says, your weaving of advocacy of diversity and the visual languages of abstraction and representation is extraordinary. Can you talk more about how these seem to be merging?
Yeah, so with this, I really learned a lot about like what abstraction actually is. So I thought it was just like kind of this like weird art form that you had to be super intelligent to understand. But I like doing these figures that are sort of abstracted in the way that they resemble like humans, obviously, but they're not super realistic. And I feel like that way it seems a little bit more universal and inviting for other people to try and understand.
I think you do a great job of that. I wanted to ask a little bit more about your time when you were Drake, which was just what, months ago?
Yeah.
It probably feels like years ago now. But do you have an important memory or takeaway experience of your time in FAC or in Carnegie? Something that maybe has influenced your art practice?
I would say kind of what I mentioned in the presentation, that Angela Battle actually helped me a lot with asking these questions that were really hard and that I often didn't want to answer. And kind of like Jill mentioned last week, I got sometimes frustrated that I was being asked these questions because I didn't want to think too deeply into it. But I'm glad that I was asked those questions because I reflect on them a lot now. And I ask myself and my family these questions, like, is this mural coming across as inclusive to you? Like, does it achieve what you want it to achieve? And I'll get feedback from them on what they think and what they think I should do.
I just still think about this summer when I didn't know Jill. She graduated 15 years ago, and that both of you were included and got awards in the Polk County Heritage Gallery exhibition. And then I've seen you all together. Like, you just are so supportive of each other's works, that you've been on other talks together. And I love that friendship that's forming with art as the center of that.
Yeah.
Lenore Metric Chin has a question. And she says that your work has a frieze-like quality where no element overlaps another and the space is very shallow. And you talked about a type of diversity that is important to you in terms of the subject matter, the inclusion of people of color. So how do these other elements speak to diversity, or do they?
That, I think, goes a little bit back to what I was talking about with including different people's voices. So just different styles of art can be really telling of your background or your diversity. And a lot of my color choices, I think, is subconsciously influenced by my background and my Mexican heritage. So that's why I like to include all these bright colors and these big shapes that are just soft and energizing to capture and create a lot of movement.
It's a beautiful answer. Do we have any other questions for Marissa? So as we wait, I have one last question. Your Mainframe space looks so inspiring to see your mood board and inspiration images behind you. I think the question is, what's up next? What are you going to be working on?
I have a couple murals already planned for 2021. So I have one that's I'll be completing and announcing on my Instagram and Facebook. That'll start on the 31st of December. And then another potential project for February and potential one for April, but I'm not sure. But I also am looking to complete my Abolish Ice mural. That one's really important to me, and I want to spend more time in my studio because I've been spending a lot of time out other places doing murals.
Marissa, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, for sharing your story, for sharing your artwork, for sharing your ideas. I think you gave people a lot to consider about diversity and representation. And I want to wish you all the luck and your continued success with your art career. So thank you so much.
You.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Tune in 2021 in January, where we continue our Artist Talk lecture series with Cat Rocket Ship. Thanks everyone, and take care. Good night.